So let's get right into it. We're here at a Disruptors event. We want to talk about disruption and also diversity. So we have seen actually a dramatic drop off in the dollars and the deal volume related to Black founded companies. This is according to data from Crunchbase. From Q1 2022 to Q2, funding's down 73%, deals are down 46%. The general thinking here is that VCs and private equity companies are looking to reduce their risk with a potential recession on the horizon. As we face that possibility of a recession, how do you see this trend impacting the funding of Black, person of color, and women-founded businesses?
Yeah, and Frank, again, thank you for really taking on this topic. It's critically important that we in this country, in America, look to really, enable all of our citizenry to participate in this great economic opportunity that is, capitalism. As you're seeing now, of course, the world is going through, a resetting and a revaluation in some respects, and the current dynamics are decreasing the funding in the VC world, and in some respects the private equity world. And it is disproportionately hitting African American, Latinx business owners and business founders. They didn't get, I'll call it, their fair share of opportunity in gaining access to capital during the massive bull market expansion. And now that we're going through a bit of a bear market contraction, we're seeing actually they're seeing some outsized reductions in their funding. And I think that is, a mistake on behalf of a lot of the VC community. The communities in America rely on, everyone in many cases participating economically, and enabling these citizens to participate through venture funding and other forms of access to capital will only benefit the U.S., especially in an environment where we're seeing more of a moving away towards, complete globalism, and moving to, somewhat nationalism in some respects, which I think is partially a mistake. And people moving to kind of near shore or onshore, allied shore, supply chains. And, if you're going to think about that as a construct and a framing, then you really need to think about how you enable all of the U.S.-based businesses to be more effective in competing in their markets, and capital and know-how are critical to that equation.
So you mentioned the bull market. Last year, actually, we saw a 5-year high in funding going to Black founded firms. It was probably a similar environment for women and person of color founded firms. That, of course, also coincides a year later, or in some cases months later, after the death of George Floyd. After that, a lot of companies and a lot of firms obviously recommitted themselves to social equity and economic equity. How much of a factor do you believe the bull market was in these companies, Black founded, woman founded, person of color founded companies getting more funded? And how much of it was this newfound commitment to equity?
Yeah, I think, it's a good question. And like all things, there's probably no clear answer. I think one thing I would point to is, in America, less than, I think it's 1.3% of the capital is actually being managed by people of color, especially in the worlds of private equity and venture capital. And again, I think that is, and while it has increased, since the murder of George Floyd, it needs to be more sustainable, and to increase even further. From some of those modest increases, we did see the expansion of opportunity sets, venture capital and capital formation companies that really focused on African American and Latinx businesses, and in some cases, women-run and women-owned businesses. I can point to a couple. One of my good friends, Rich Dennis, he has a new fund called the New Voices Fund, and it's very effective in targeting, identifying, principally in some consumer businesses, some media businesses, and different forms of fashion, et cetera. And I think has a very large ecosystem surrounding the way that they attract, retain, and develop these businesses of color. We at Vista, we've done an effective job, I think, with our ecosystem in funding some of the largest Latinx businesses, and actually African American businesses, and some through our founder direct business, some through our private equity business. And if we didn't have expansion of capital, it could be a little more constrained as to putting this sort of capital into the hands of other citizens in our country. And I would look at the underwriting in these businesses, and they've been, spectacular performers, and which is what you find in these communities, but they've just been, systemically starved of capital for so long. I think that needs to be remedied systemically as well.
So you hit on a point I was going to ask you about next. According to data from your firm, Vista Equity Partners, less than 1% of assets under management in the roughly $80 trillion asset management industry are managed by Black, person of color, and women-owned firms, despite the fact that data shows that their returns are comparable to the average or median results of all firms when you put them all together. Do these trends highlight the importance of diversity in asset management?
Yes, and in fact, when you look at, there's a group called the NAIC, and it's called the National Association of Investment Companies, led by a guy by the name of Bob Green, and they're a great resource, frankly, for identifying these diverse managers. They did a study, and it was over 20 years, really looking at how do you quantify the performance of these diverse managers, and it was clear and clearly demonstrated that these diverse managers, by every indicator, performed and bested the industry average. And it's important that the institutional asset managers, the pension funds, really start to, evaluate and make sure that the hands of the money that are actually turning over, the capital, i.e., their beneficiaries, are, reflected in the asset managers that they hire. And I think, there's a fiduciary responsibility there that needs to be, taken quite seriously, and really looking at these high performing firms that are run by, African American and Latinx managers, and ensuring that they get their fair share relative to what is the contributing base. The federal government has the same challenge as well. There's, if you look at the federal government's, I'll call it makeup of contributors and employees, there's nowhere near that sort of proportion that's actually in the hands of asset managers who look like those employees who've been, dedicating their lives, careers, and decades of contribution. So I think there needs to be some greater focus and scrutiny. And, it isn't just, oh, gee, let's just do it because it's not just the right thing to do. But frankly, these managers have outperformed based on these unequivocal studies that have been done by numerous organizations, including the NAIC.
So we're, of course, doing a Disruptors event. I got to ask you, how important is diversity to disruption?
Yeah, it's again, I look at, diversity as really just being reflective of the communities that you serve. For a public pension plan, what is the community that you are serving? And, are you actually serving them with reflective of, the asset managers that you hire? For us, we've got some interesting challenges in the U.S. I'll say our borders are effectively closed, and I don't think we have an immigration policy that seems to satisfy the various constituents in our government to continue to attract and retain and expand the base of immigrant talent into the U.S. So we have to truly focus on the people who are here and making the best utilization of their talents and capabilities. So, part of that is enabling African American Latinx to participate in technology in ways that they haven't before. With one of the efforts that we work on, is over 80% of the HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, don't have access to broadband. They're in broadband deserts. Well, how are you going to educate and inform and enable this large citizenry to participate and really help these businesses that are in need of workers and in need of trained employees if you don't give them the tool set to enable them to participate effectively. So that's part of the challenge, and the diversity piece of it. We all know the statistics, and McKinsey and others have built out these studies and showing that typically companies that are gender and racially diverse have 25% and more likely to have above average performance. And we have seen that, call it ad nauseum in some respect, but now we have to do something about it and enable these citizens and these communities to truly participate. And now's the time to do it, since we really have, a lack of talent, a lack of employees to really satisfy what hopefully will be, the continued expansion of the U.S. economy. And without trained, insightful, and creative people, which come from these communities, I think it's going to be very difficult to continue and have a sustainable economy.
Speaking of people from these communities, you are yourself a disruptor. You were obviously trained as an engineer, but you went to investment banking and then opening up your own firm. So is there a pathway? Are there bricks laid down for another Robert F. Smith to come up and disrupt tech and tech investing the way you have with your system?
Yeah, and part of the pathway is, mine was paved with an internship at Bell Laboratories when I was 17 years old, and I'm proud that through our Fund 2 Foundation, we've set up the Intern XL program. We have, I think now it's over 19,000 students who participate, and these are students from HBCUs and MSIs, which are minority serving institutions. And these students, we've built a system and a platform, a learning management system. These students have taken over 57,000 courses through this academy. And that offers everything from technical courses, enrichment courses, certification courses, as well as some soft skills training. And, creating these pathways, these on-ramps and these opportunity sets, I think will be the way you create a 1,000 Robert Smiths plus. I think it's important that every institution that has the capacity to take on these interns should. And if you are taking on interns, increase the amount. We need to really train our citizenry to really participate more effectively. Part of that training also includes, conscious inclusion training, help to understand, people who come from different backgrounds and I call it, the acceptance of the other and understanding, what are the biases and ties that need to be understood and then, in many cases dissolved, so that we can participate more fully and really reach the promise of what America should be and can be.
Well, by the way, I think anybody graduating from college wishes there were 1,000 Robert Smiths, which you did for the Morehouse graduating class. Memorable. I'm sure all of them appreciated a great deal. I also want to talk about your primary business. We're glad you're here talking to us about diversity and disruption, but your primary business is obviously Vista Equity Partners. You recently closed a deal for no before. How do you see the current landscape when it comes to tech and not only diversity, but just inclusion when it comes to employee bases and things like that?
Sure. I mean, and again, it's important that you utilize, all of the resources at your disposal to drive your, in our case, our core business. We are at our core an investor in enterprise software. It's the most productive tool. It's been introduced in our business economy over the last 50 years. And, if not now, when has been the greater opportunity for productivity tools to be used? We've got wage inflation challenges. We've got challenges with expansion of markets and efficiency of utilization of call it resources and supply chain, and technology and enterprise software in particular solves a lot of these issues. So we now, sitting on a portfolio, call it 85 or 86 software companies, and just finished one briefing and seeing growth across the graph, the vast majority of them. And the main reason is, there's a massive demand for these products. These are products that educate workforce. They're products that enable cybersecurity protection. These are products that enable productivity solutions and in supply chain solutions that you can't otherwise capture without the leveraging or utilization of these tools and services. So my core business is to ensure that I deliver to my my constituency base the resources, the capability to enable each one of our companies to be successful in the markets that they operate in, their management teams to develop and enhance their capabilities and their go-to-market strategies, and then of course to return these returns to our stakeholders, which are principally our investors, but also the employees, and ensuring that they have a place to work that feels like they've got that they feel accepted. We are, I think, one of the few gender parity private equity firms. Over in addition to that, over 36% of our people of color, and still from our performances, you can see that all matters. And we want to ensure that every one of our software companies has the ability to attract and retain the best talent from wherever they come from to continue and expand their growth rate. So we view it as very much part and parcel to the performance of our businesses to have inclusive philosophies around talent management and talent development.